remember, you will.
Okay.
People can hear you.
And Adam's scarf. Scarf. They have the lady scarf.
Oh,
I know. I didn't realize
I
that.
didn't realize that either. We'll have to do that.
Yes. I know. We're gonna get with Kathy.
Yeah. No, I'll have to go stop and see her.
I know. I'll have to go up there and see her. I need to go speak with Bradley about a quote.
Yeah.
She needs a quote. Because it was, she kind of said I need a quote. I was like, oh, that's right. Like, I'm going to need to narrow it down to a topic because I can give you a lot of quotes. Some you don't even want. Hey, good morning.
Well, hello. Welcome. Are you going to get some food?
Thank you.
You going to?
Grab a bite.
Okay, quickly.
Mateo? Yes, sir. We'll stretch.
Hi. You're fine.
Good morning.
Okay. Get your food. There's some preliminaries, but so you'll have time to eat, but go get it now.
Microphone.
Huh?
You're on microphone. Yeah.
You don't have any time.
What's up, buddy? How's it going?
It works. Okay.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you. I'm Morton Blackwell, president of the Leadership Institute, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this, the Leadership Institute's June Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast. We live in interesting times. Lots of things are happening that conservatives have dreamt of for a very long time, and never before has there been major progress made. Government defunding the National Public Radio and the PBS. Imagine that, these leftist operations being defunded. But sometimes things happen that are extraordinary, and I have here this morning's Washington Post. What you might call the lead story on the top of the front page. And the headline reads, Bowser prolongs cooperation via order. D.C. Mayor Muriel E. Bowser on Tuesday ordered indefinite coordination between the city and federal law enforcement officials, a powerful indication of her willingness to cooperate with President Trump's effort to take over public safety in the capital city. The second paragraph, Bowser issued an executive order that requires local coordination with federal law enforcement, quote, to the maximum extent allowable by law within the district. Just, I mean, who would have thought we would have lived to see a day and a headline that way as the lead story in the Washington Post. I encourage you to live tweet today's breakfast. The hashtag, I believe, is on the screen. This year, in 2025, your Leadership Institute has already trained 13,370 conservatives at 938 individual training events. Since 1979, the Institute has trained more than 346,157 people, activists, students, and leaders. And you have before you at your table the Leadership Institute schedule of schools for the coming month. Please take a moment to review these schools and consider attending one or sending a friend to a training. And if you are watching us online, as many are, you can visit our website at leadershipinstitute.org/training to see upcoming online and in-person training. It's my pleasure now to introduce Matteo Portelli, who will offer an invocation and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Matteo earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in history from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, his hometown. He is currently pursuing a Master of Science in Cybersecurity at Old Dominion University. In 2017, at the age of 16, Mateo graduated from the Leadership Institute flagship school, our Youth Leadership School. Mateo served as a field organizer for the Trump Victory Campaign and was Nevada State Director for National Republican Senatorial Committee's Historic Latino Outreach Program, earning him recognition as a Republican Party Rising Star and the National Republican Senatorial Committee Medal of Freedom. This past May, he was commissioned as a U.S. Army Cyber Warfare Officer with the Virginia National Guard, where he serves in the 91st Cyber Brigade in offensive cyber warfare. Mateo is currently one of the Leadership Institute's Information Technology Operations Specialists. Mateo, would you come up and offer an invocation and lead us in the pledge? Move out of your way.
Please bow your heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this morning, for the gift of fellowship, the opportunity to gather in peace and to share a meal, and to learn together in the pursuit of truth and freedom. We lift up Mr. Will Estrada, asking that you bless his words and his witness and his work in defense of families and parental rights. Strengthen us, Lord, to be faithful stewards of the callings that you have given us, using our gifts to advance what is good and just and honorable. And may all we do here today bring glory to your name and bear fruit that endures. I ask this through Jesus Christ, your Son. Amen. And please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mateo. Well done. And now, to give us a brief programs report, we'll bring up here Lee Vasblom. After starting her professional career at the U.S. Department of Education, wow, and serving as an elementary school teacher, Lee turned her attention to civic and political engagement. She has worked on several local and state campaigns, such as Elizabeth Dole's U.S. Senate campaign, and held board positions on many different organizations in Pennsylvania, including as the vice president of the Central Bucks School Board. Now she's director of the Leadership Institute's rapidly growing School Board Leaders Program. Lee now brings her extensive experience in school board campaigning and governance to train conservative school board champions across America. Lee, step up there, please.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you, and good morning. And thank you, Morton, for identifying early on and getting ahead of recognizing this area as a vital part of education reform. We are blessed with our program to be able to go throughout the U.S. and train activists, community members, school board candidates, and school board members. And in doing so, we have recognized that this is the space that has been left alone and has become dominated by the leftist ideologies and the school board associations and their leftist agendas. So we are going to take this space back. We are going to be the new opportunity to train and especially in school board governance. I don't know if many of you are aware, but each state has a different requirement for its school board members, especially newly elected school board members. They require a varying amount of hours for new school board members, and the only organizations currently doing this is the National School Board Association and their state chapters. And this is the same National School Board Association that in 2021 referred to parents as domestic terrorists for being concerned about schools and showing up at school board meetings and expressing their concerns. So as you could imagine, this is really a space that's important, and Leadership Institute is honored to be able to get in that space, do better training, and do it for less money. It's not only a leftist-controlled organization, but it also has become very wealthy, these state associations, off the backs of our children and their school districts. For example, in Texas, the Texas Association of School Board Members had revenue in '23 of $91 million. $81 million of that was made from services offered to school districts. Every bit of that $81 million came out of school district budgets. That's $81 million that could have been used to teach children to read. So we have a very large task, and we are blessed from our donors that allow us the opportunity to be able to do this vital work. So it is difficult to share a program in 5 minutes, so I'm going to do a very quick overview, and I am doing something wrong with my clicker. So if you could help me, thank you. So one of the products that and opportunities that we provide with School Board Leaders Program is our Learn Right Summits. And this is an opportunity for the community to come together and discuss the current issues within the school districts and the school, in a regional area, and to really provide solutions, to hear from local leaders on things that are working, to listen to local school board members and to legal counsels, and really have a whole day full of discussions and strategies for candidates, for community members, parents, and school board members. In '25, we had taken our once a year larger Learn Right and broken it down into 4 regional summits: Anaheim, California, Dallas, Philadelphia, Denver. Next year, we are excited to be in Atlanta, Little Rock, Knoxville, and Tampa, Florida. We also have a wonderful emerging program, which is state accreditation, which I spoke about briefly in this required training. So we, as Leadership Institute, are going into states, and we are following the application process to become an accredited trainer so that Leadership Institute can also be on the list of choices for the state school board associations. And we have secured accreditation in Oklahoma, Tennessee, Arkansas. And we then have the ability to go in and provide those required trainings. And we are also trying to secure and applying currently to Missouri, Georgia. My list is South Carolina. I didn't want to, Texas. Perfect. And Louisiana. Morton, we're going to get down in your home state. And West Virginia. And Mississippi. Mississippi is interesting. Their Department of Education gave the Mississippi School Board Association a $65,000 grant to do their training. So Leadership Institute is going to apply for that grant as well. So we have some exciting things on the front for state accreditation. Not all states require a specific amount of hours. So 15 states either don't require training, allow their local school districts to choose it, or have created legislation that gives the School Board Association a monopoly. So in those instances, your Leadership Institute will go into those states and will work with local conservative organizations and provide training, anyway, even though we don't need to be accredited. So some of the organizations that we are working with currently, the Texans for Excellence in Education, School Board Member Alliance of Virginia, Maricopa County. Shelley Boggs is their newly elected state superintendent. And she is a Leadership Institute graduate, as well as our Activist of the Year. She now oversees 750,000 children. Maricopa County has more children in it than most states. And she is inviting Leadership Institute to come in and provide all the training for their school board members. What an impact. We also are working with organizations like Florida. So this is exciting news, and you can advance it, thank you. And we have not forgotten that if you don't win, you do not govern. So we are very actively working on getting and helping train school board candidates. And we are doing it in a variety of ways, and I put up a quick example of something we're doing in Philadelphia, a project in which we tried to grow the coalitions of school board candidates so that they work together to win their seats and then govern effectively. So we have, it's a school board election year in Pennsylvania, so this is a good reminder. It's never an off year for school boards. Somewhere in the United States, there are always school board elections. And we have grown from one school district to 34 unique school districts in 6 months. So we're looking forward to seeing November's results and hope that we are able to get some really wonderful school board candidates elected and on their school boards. So thank you so much for your support of our program. And we do look forward to seeing you at some of our events. And if you have any additional questions, I will be around after the meeting. So thank you. Is there any questions or do we have time? I might have gone over my time. Thank you. Oh, I'm going to leave this right here.
Well, obviously we need to thank the donors for the ability to do what we're doing with respect to school boards. In addition to all of this training and internal operations, we also have a very active program training people who want to be elected to school boards. A very serious program. We just got started in it in a big way, but already there are 310 school board members across the country people who won election after being trained by the Leadership Institute. So that is a big project. And now, is Mark here? Madsen, there he is. Okay, my pleasure to introduce Mark Madsen, who will introduce our featured speaker. Mark first experienced the Leadership Institute as a college student through our flagship school, the Youth Leadership School. After attending his first Leadership Institute program, he received an internship at the Leadership Institute, and then we hired Mark on full-time. 2 years ago, Mark left Leadership Institute to dedicate 2 years to volunteer ministry work in Latin America. And since he has returned to the Leadership Institute now as a partnership advisor, building strong and lasting relationships with the Leadership Institute supporters to advance our organization's mission. Really outstanding young man. Happy to have you back with us, Mark. come up and do your work.
So it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Will Estrada. Will began his legal career working for HSLDA in January 2004 as a legal assistant to HSLDA Senior Counsel Scott Woodruff. After graduating from Oak Brook College of Law and Government Policy with his Juris Doctor in 2006, he moved on to direct HSLDA's Federal Relations Department and serve as HSLDA's federal lobbyist. Will worked as a career federal employee in the Office for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services from 2008 to 2001. In November of 2021, he resigned from the federal government and was selected by the board of parentalrights.org to serve as the first full-time president of parentalrights.org and the Parental Rights Foundation. In June of 2023, Will decided to return to his roots at HSLDA, this time serving as a senior counsel and contact attorney for HSLDA members in the states of California, Georgia, Illinois, Maryland, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Tennessee, Wyoming, as well as Washington, D.C. He works to make homeschooling possible for thousands of member families and hundreds of thousands of homeschool students by advocating in state legislatures for homeschool freedom, working to ensure that homeschool graduates are treated equally and that the laws protecting the rights of homeschool families are followed by government officials. Will is a member of the following state and federal bars: U.S. Supreme Court, 1st Columbia Court of Appeals, 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, California, and District of Columbia. In June of 2023, Will was selected by Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin to serve a 4-year term on the Board of Visitors of Christopher Newport University in Newport News, Virginia. Will is a homeschool graduate from Pennsylvania. He and his wife Rachel, a homeschool graduate from Virginia, homeschool their 2 sons in Northern Virginia.
Well, it's a privilege to be here with all of you. Morton, thank you for having me. Morton is... Is that me? What? Nope. Don't want a little voice speaking here. That's weird. Morton is one of my heroes. When you think of the people who have really gotten us to where we are today, Morton Blackwell, Phyllis Schlafly, of course, with Eagle Forum, Mike Farris with Homeschool Legal Defense Association and Patrick Henry College. You're some of Ed Meese, of course, with Heritage Foundation. Morton is there as one of the people who has gotten us to where we are today, who has lit that flame. So, Morton, it's always an honor and very humbling to be here with you. Let's give Morton a round of applause. I have kind of a little bit of a different talk than I've given previously, so I hope you'll bear with me. But at first, I'm going to do my standard talk of talking about homeschooling because I am a homeschool graduate. I see several of my friends like Tim here as well who are also homeschool graduates. I know there are many others here. My wife and I are homeschooling our kids as well, so second-generation homeschooling. And I'm privileged to work at Homeschool Legal Defense Association. We were founded in 1983. Back then, homeschooling was illegal in many of the 50 states. Kind of hard to imagine that right now, but parents getting thrown in jail. The last state to legalize homeschooling was Texas, actually, with the Leeper decision in 1994. And the Leeper parents were actually put in jail, and then they prevailed in court. And then right around that time as well was Michigan as well. So Michigan and Texas were the last 2 states. And now we think of it like Texas was throwing parents in jail for homeschooling their kids. It's kind of amazing. But again, because of that work of lighting the fire of freedom that people like Morton and Mike Farris and Phyllis Schlafly and Ed Meese and others did, today we have so much freedom in the United States of America, and we need even more, right? I mean, do we want to live tweet that Muriel Bowser got a round of applause today? But she did. I mean, what is happening here? So take away Matt's phone and his Twitter. So a little bit about Homeschool Legal Defense, where I work. We share office space with Patrick Henry College in Purcellville, Virginia. We have about 100,000 member families nationwide. Of course, there are millions of homeschoolers, so not everyone is a member of HSLDA, and that's fine. I would love to work myself out of a job, but it seems that hasn't happened yet. I'm busier than ever fighting back against school districts and states. And then we are a public advocacy and interest law firm that serves homeschoolers, advances parental rights, and works closely with organizations like Leadership Institute. And I had to put my family up there, my wife Rachel, and our sons Dominic and Merrick, and our rescue dog Daisy. And so that was a picture we got at a sunflower field, I think in Centerville, Virginia. So it's like acres and acres of sunflowers. If you want to get your family pictures done, there is quite a popular spot. When we talk about homeschooling, and again, before I get to the meat of my talk, I just wanted to kind of discuss some of these things about homeschooling, in case you didn't know. It always goes back to parental rights. And last time I was here, I talked about a recent law review article that I had written called Homeschooling in the United States, a Seismic Parental Rights Victory, published in 2024 by Liberty University School of Law. I went through the history of parental rights, going back to in the beginning, the Greeks, the Islamic, the Jewish, the Christian scriptures, English common law philosophers. Won't go through all of that today, but I do love marking the milestones. And we have 102 years of U.S. Supreme Court precedents establishing parental rights. And then this year is the 100th anniversary of Pierce versus Society of Sisters. It was June 1st, 1925, so we celebrated that on June 1st, 2025. And that was where the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously said the child is not the mere creature of the state. I also like having old black and white pictures up here. That is Robert Meyer. He was the teacher in a one-room schoolhouse teaching German in the landmark case of Meyer versus Nebraska. That was where Nebraska had passed a law banning instruction of children in any language other than English. He was teaching a 10-year-old German immigrant boy how to read from the Martin Luther translation of the Bible. He was arrested, he was convicted, and then the U.S. Supreme Court overturned his conviction. So Meyer versus Nebraska in 1923, Pierce versus Society of Sisters in 1925, Wisconsin versus Yoder, the Amish and Mennonite, in 1972, and then Troxel versus Granville more recently in 2000, and then Mahmoud versus Taylor, the case that came out of Montgomery County, Maryland, with the public schools just earlier this year, which reminds me, and Lee, what you're doing with the school boards, and Morton, how Leadership Institute has led into that is so critically important, because not everyone's going to homeschool their kids. Not everyone can afford to private school their kids. Public education is still really always going to be here, although it's been very interesting to see I think public education is breaking under the stress of multiple different factors. Not all of them are actually the fault of the public schools. You have a crisis of student discipline, and I think a lot of that is the fault of parents. My little Johnny would never do anything bad, and when schools try and enforce discipline, you've got these helicopter parents coming in and saying, he is a great kid and don't discipline him. So there's many, many issues in public education. But the work that you're doing to train school board members is absolutely critical. I've talked to many school board members, and I always, this is not the giving of legal advice, so talk to your counsel, talk to Lee before you try and do this at home. But I talk to school board members, and I say, well, here's a little Rorschach blot test that you can do when you get into the school board to make sure that your school board attorney knows what he or she is talking about. Ask them, well, are we complying with FERPA to protect parental rights? And if they are a bad school board attorney, they'll say, oh no, FERPA protects the privacy of children from their parents. And that is because of a footnote that the ACLU put into letters a couple years ago and sent to pretty much every school board in the United States of America. There's never been a court case saying that. FERPA, when you read it, protects the privacy of minors through their parents, so parental rights like these court cases. So, again, not giving of legal advice, I think Will Estrada's personal opinion is kick your school board attorney to the curb and hire a new school board attorney if they can't answer that FERPA Rorschach blot test. And of course, FERPA is the 1974. Yeah, we got a round of applause here. The applause does not mean it's the giving of legal advice either. FERPA, don't want to get you in trouble here, Morton. FERPA, of course, is the 1974 federal privacy law, and it's worth going back and reading it. It does need to be updated, but Excitingly enough, the Trump administration at the Department of Education is for the first time in about 15 years trying to enforce FERPA. They have some cases going, and so it'll be very interesting to see if they prevail. Real quick, because I like showing black and white pictures, here's the great quote from Meyer versus Nebraska, where the Supreme Court first sort of said, as you can see in the quote, kind of mealy-mouthed, like, well, we think that the family is important, and so we should protect parental rights. That was the first case. Interestingly enough, they go back and they quote Plato. Plato had this weird saying, and people don't know if he was serious or if he was being sarcastic, that the guardians should be the ones raising the children, the guardians of the republic, and he said, and children shall not know their parents, nor parents their children, then it goes on, and they say, we reject what Plato said, the family comes first. Then, 1925, the very famous case of Pierce versus Society of Sisters. This is where the Supreme Court said the child is not the mere creature of the state. Of course, what had happened was Oregon had passed a law banning all private education. These are the Society of Sisters. I mean, these were the scary nuns. These were the ones that you had a generation of kids where they would get beaten if they mouthed off to their teacher. And we had, good legislators. We had a better civic society. So maybe bring back the hardcore nuns from Pierce versus Society of Sisters. And of course, they prevailed. Oregon's law banning private education was struck down 9-0 as a violation of parental rights and the history of parental rights in our United States legal system. I love the case Wisconsin versus Yoder from 1972. This was when the Amish and Old Order Mennonite families withdrew their children from public education at the end of 8th grade. Fun fact, you go back and look at the 8th grade tests. I couldn't pass all of those tests, actually. They are serious. I mean, you have to, without a calculator, do some amazing math, and I went to law because I'm not great at math, but even just the history, and I love history, I love social studies, I was like, I don't know if I could write a one-page essay about some of these constitutional amendments and things just right off the bat, and these are 8th graders. So they want to pull their kids out of public school at 8th grade so they could learn the history and tradition of farming and what they would do with a family and living in their culture. They were convicted, and they were going to pay the fine. Amish, Mennonite, kind of turning the other cheek. And it was a famous lawyer who had represented many Amish families for free. And he said, we serve a higher standard, the law of God. Let's take this case. They appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. There's Jonas Yoder and some of the other parents walking to the U.S. Supreme Court before oral arguments, and they prevailed in Wisconsin versus Yoder. Interestingly enough, there is an Wisconsin versus Yoder movement. I've heard people say it is the most badly decided decision because they cannot respect the right of even religious parents to be able to pull their children out of public school. James Dwyer, a professor at William & Mary, is one of the proponents of this. Elizabeth Bartholet at Harvard, who of course famously in 2020 wrote a law review article saying that homeschooling should be, quote, presumptively banned. She is another proponent of this anti-Wisconsin versus Yoder argument. Thankfully, they're fringe voices, but they are out there, and I guess I'm not yet successful in working myself out of a job at Homeschool Legal Defense because of Professor Dwyer and Professor Bartholet. There are other cases as well, but these are some of my favorite. Troxel versus Granville was a grandparent visitation case out of Washington State, and the Supreme Court said, in light of this extensive precedent, it cannot now be doubted that the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment protects the fundamental right of parents to make decisions concerning the care, custody, and control of their children. And then just most recently, a few months ago, Mahmoud versus Taylor, the practice of educating one's children in one's religious beliefs, like all religious acts and practices, receives a generous measure of protection from our Constitution. And again, drawing on enduring American tradition is what the court said. We have long recognized the rights of parents to direct the religious upbringing of their children. And this is not merely a right to teach religion in the confines of one's own home. And then they went on and they struck down Montgomery County's policy of prohibiting parents from opting their kids out of certain courses. Interestingly enough, and this is just kind of a sidebar here, the protection of religious families' education. Of course, this is not just Christian. This is, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, every religion is well established and protected. But there's been some debate of, for secular people, do they get that as much of a protection? And so far we haven't really seen this come up in court, but I've represented secular families. I've helped them with their homeschooling, and it's a little worrisome because I think parental rights are for everyone, not just people who adhere to a religious faith. Now, of course, I'm a born-again Christian, so I'm religious, but I think parental rights extend to every single person. It is one of those fundamental, God-given, natural law rights. The Greek philosophers, Aristotle, Plutarch, they wrote about it coming from nature, and of course, they were polytheistic Greeks, so that's going to be an interesting thing to keep your eye on. But what I wanted to talk about, one more thing. Who are homeschoolers? There's a fascinating article that came out last year. It's called The Changing Face of American Homeschool, a 25-year comparison of race and ethnicity. And what they found was 40% of homeschool students today are minorities, people of color. I'm Latino, I'm Puerto Rican, and a homeschooler as well. My wife's Korean. And so that's been really interesting to see. We see attacks on homeschooling of like, oh, you're all just white fundamental MAGA Republicans. And I'm like, well, actually, look at the studies. It's very diverse, and it's growing, and it's really been very interesting to see that. There's been significant growth. Some estimates are as many as 5 million homeschooled students in the nation, somewhere between 5 and 6% of the school-age population. I've seen some estimates going closer to 8%. I'm not sure that those are accurate, but it's been very exciting to see that growing. And if you want to dig deeper into this, the U.S. Department of Education in the National Center for Education Statistics did a report on September 17th, 2024. It's fascinating, goes into why people homeschool, all those sort of things. And there's a nice map from HSLDA's webpage, hslda.org. There are 50 state laws governing homeschooling. We don't want a federal law regarding homeschooling. I personally don't think it's the federal government's business, so we sometimes have to politely tell our friends in D.C., nope, please don't protect homeschooling, just make sure we're treated fairly, that sort of thing. But it's at the state level. The green states are where you do not need to notify the government that you're choosing to homeschool. The red states are very highly regulated. There are only 4 of them, so it's a little bit flipped, red and blue. Sorry about that. But New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island are the 4 most heavily regulated states. I handle Pennsylvania for Homeschool Legal Defense, and we are very, very busy there defending homeschool freedom. And you can go to hslda.org/legal if you want to dig more into that. But today, in my last minutes here, because I'm mindful of the clock and I know Morton will send his bees on me to chase me off if I talk too long, I wanted to take a moment to kind of step back and say, why do we do all of this? Why are we, like my friend Dennis, leaving retirement to go and serve in the federal government? Why are we, Mateo, serving in the U.S. military? Why are we as interns here at Leadership Institute? Why are we, if we're more seasoned citizens, why are we still showing up to listen to a lawyer speak at 8 o'clock in the morning? Why are we still involved in what we do? And there's even some broader questions. Why do we stay in a marriage? Why do we choose to go into a relationship? Why do we do the why of raising our children, raising our grandchildren? And it's something maybe I've been thinking about a little bit more because I turned 42, and obviously some of you are looking at me like, Will, you're a spring chicken. But I remember the line of Moses. There's Psalm 90 in the Jewish and Christian scriptures. Moses, of course, led the people of Israel out of Egypt. We all know that Moses looked like Charlton Heston, so of course I pulled the picture there. If young people, if you've not seen the 10 Commandments, Cecil B. DeMille's with Charlton Heston, you are missing out on life. Go back and watch it. It's a great movie, but he looked like Charlton Heston. He did not look like the bust that faces the Speaker's rostrum in the House of Representatives. If I ever become dictator for a day, which would be terrible, so I hope it doesn't happen, I will change the bust in the U.S. House of Representatives to look like Charlton Heston, but I digress. But in Psalm 90, Moses writes some words that I've always struck with me, particularly as I'm getting older. And it says, and this is the King James Version because I love it, the days of our years are 80 years and 10, and if by reason of strength they be 80 years, yet is their strength labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off and we fly away. So teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. For the younger people here, a score is 20 years. Remember, Abraham Lincoln says 7 years ago, et cetera, et cetera. So if you ever come across that line in literature of 10, it's that reference to 70 years that Moses wrote there. And it's been, as I get older, and again, I'm humbled when I'm here with a group of the giants who I hope to stand on your shoulders, but it is something of, as you start to get older, you start to think of, why am I doing what I do? And I want to share with you a couple quotes to just re-encourage you. If you're young, to kind of fire up that why. If you're older, to re-encourage you. And again, this is just the perspective of a 42-year-old. So some of you are like, man, he's old. Some of you are like, man, he's young. Some of you are like, well, that's where I am. But to share that perspective, and I'm sure it'll change as I get older and I reach the seasoned years of people like Morton and others. But I love the quote by the Irish poet William Butler Yeats, who said, education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. If you're going through education, and all of us are going through education, that is the most important thing. I talk to young people, I talk to homeschool parents very often, and I say, you're not doing schooling. School is a location. You are doing education, the inculcation of values, of learning, of that lighting a fire, because it doesn't end. As long as you're alive, you should have that fire to learn and to pass that fire on to other people. So I could have a whole talk about education versus schooling. Time precludes us from doing that. Maybe one day, if I'm not, kicked off the speaker list here, I'll come back and give a further talk about that. The second quote I want to leave with you, and I love, you're probably like, well, Will really likes the Irish and Scottish dissidents here. Andrew Fletcher was a Scottish patriot, and when you think of Scottish patriot, we think of William Wallace, his face with the blue and the paint on it, and Mel Gibson, again, because that's what William Wallace looked like, going around with that crazy look and his giant broadsword, Claymore, I think they're called, like freedom sort of thing. But there were many such Scottish patriots, and Andrew Fletcher was one in the 1700s. And the quote that he has, and you could give a whole speech about this as well, because it's really profound when you start to think of it, is, let me make the songs of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws. We hear a lot that debate of, it's politics or it's culture, which one? And really, and I've got some other quotes that we'll dive into this a little bit more in our final minutes, it really doesn't matter. Wherever we are writing the songs of the nation. And Mike Farris has a speech where he talks about singing, but singing sweetly. Because you can sing and sound like, well, I won't make fun of any singers, but you can sound really not great. Like if shots fired. We had a Bob Dylan, anti-Bob Dylan quote here. There's some funny videos of people making fun of Bob Dylan, but I digress. Yes, cracking up here, sorry. We hear many people who are singing or speaking, and we see them on TV sometimes, but they're not doing it sweetly. And it's fun to own the libs and to beat up people, but why are we really doing this? To pass on that generation of that freedom, that love of freedom, that fire of freedom to the next generation, so we can continue to preserve really what we have in the United States, which I believe is very precious and very rare. You all saw that comedian in England who got arrested for his tweets. We see the videos of armed cops showing up in the UK, politicians getting thrown in jail. Well, they tried to do that here. Getting thrown in jail in Germany and France and other places. Homeschooling is banned in many European countries. Brazil is trying to ban homeschooling. The freedom that we have in the United States is very, very, very unique and very special, and not really that common even in other kind of Western tradition countries. And you all are probably thinking of that Reagan quote that I'm going to close with, but I always keep coming back to that. And so wherever you are, remember what Fletcher said. If you write the songs of the nation, I care not who writes the laws. We all have a sphere of influence. And think about that why of why you're doing something, because that is so critical and important of passing it on to the next generation. I love this quote by Martin Luther King Jr. This is my favorite speech that he gave. It was given to a junior high school in '67, so about 6 months before Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. It was in Philadelphia. And it's famously known as the street sweeper speech. It's not a long speech, but it is an incredible speech. And I put one of the quotes here, but then I want to read the second quote because I couldn't fit it on my PowerPoint. And this has really been something that I've shared as I speak with young people, because not all of us are going to get up to give speeches at the Leadership Institute. Even smaller number are going to be elected, although Leadership Institute is much higher number of people who get elected to office or who are leading the country. But every single one of us is, I believe, placed by God here on earth for a purpose, that God loves you and that you can go and share that love with other people, but also share that love of freedom with other people. And so I tell people, whether it's 2 people or 200,000 or 2 million that you're going to talk to, remember what Martin Luther King Jr. said. He said, and when you discover what you will be in your life, set out to do it as if God Almighty called you at this particular moment in history to do it. Don't just set out to do a good job. Set out to do such a good job that the living, the dead, or the unborn couldn't do it any better. And then he went on and said, if it falls your lot to be a street sweeper, sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep streets like Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets like Leontine Price sings before the Metropolitan Opera. Sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Sweep streets so well that all the hosts of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, here lived a great street sweeper who swept his street well. If you can't be a pine at the top of the hill, be a shrub in the valley, but be the best little shrub on the side of a hill. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be a sun, be a star. For it isn't by size that you win or fail. Be the best of whatever you are. And so wherever we are, when you think of that, why am I doing it? Be the best at what God has called you to do. Be the best at what your hand is set before you. I love the book of Esther in the Jewish and Christian scriptures, who, by just a kind of divine circumstance, she becomes the queen of all of Persia. And she saves an entire people from destruction. And I remember that line of where Mordecai, her uncle, is encouraging her. And he's like, for who knows if you were raised up to the kingdom for such a time as this. And we really live in such a time as this. The Christian theologians have kind of taken what Martin Luther King Jr. said here, and it's called the doctrine of vocation. And there has been a lot written about the doctrine of vocation. That work, when you kind of go back into the Christian and Jewish traditions, work did not come after the fall. When you go back to the Genesis story, and when you read about, man in the garden, everything was great, and then they're like, man, we want everything we can't have. Of course, the two humans who ever only truly had free will, and they messed up, and they had it great, better than all of us. But work didn't come after the fall. Of course, toil and sweat and briars all came after the fall, but God puts Adam and Eve in the garden to take care of the garden. Work is something, one of the very few things, I would say work and sex within marriage, and maybe a few in eating, we all love food and drink, are some of the very few things that we do every day that have not, that did not come after the fall, after mankind fell from grace. And it's a very powerful reminder, and Martin Luther King Jr. touches on it, that whatever we are doing when we're working, it's something divinely inspired and something that's good and something that's noble. Now, of course, like anything in life, we can take it to an extreme. If you're abandoning your family to just working, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, you'll die. So don't do that. And then you're no good to anyone. But work is very good. And I love what I get to do at work. I realize, and I never take it for granted, that I get to do a job that every day I love doing, representing homeschool families, and it's been a lot of fun. We got a few final minutes, so I've got 2 final quotes for you. Of course, Ronald Reagan, our 40th president. What would be a Leadership Institute talk without talking about Ronald Reagan, right? And this is a slightly different version of the speech that we've heard of. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. This is the first time Ronald Reagan used it. It was his first inaugural address, 1967, when he had first been elected to the governorship of California. And what he said was, perhaps you and I have lived too long with this miracle to properly be appreciative. And if you go back and read it, the miracle he's talking about is self-government, being able to elect people to representationally represent us. We delegate our constitutional authority to other people for a short set of time of years to serve us. And he's talking about the miracle of American self-governance. And he says, freedom is a fragile thing, and it's never more than one generation away from extinction. It is not ours by way of inheritance. It must be fought for and defended constantly by each generation, for it comes only to once a people. And then this again, the first time he says it, later on he talks about our sunset years, telling our children what it was once like to live in America where people were free. But this one he says, and those in world history who have known freedom and then lost it have never known it again. That's a very, very sobering quote. And I think about even, when the Soviet Union came down, and they had such a generation of loss of self-governance and freedom that they didn't use their freedom well. And we see repression coming back again in countries that used to be the Soviet Union. And I still am hopeful that that can be turned around. But I then come back and read that Ronald Reagan quote, and I'm like, he was a smart man. Maybe it can't be turned around. So pass that on. Pass on that. Why do we do that? Pass on that fire of freedom to the next generation. And then final quote, I love the book of Ecclesiastes. This is a Flemish painter who did a painting of King Solomon, the wisest and richest man who ever lived. And in the book of Ecclesiastes, it starts, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And Solomon is an interesting fellow because you read the Song of Solomon, just a beautiful love song. And that was at the beginning of his life. And then you read Ecclesiastes, and he's old at the end of his life, and it's like, vanity of vanities, all is vanity, what good is in life? But then he closes in the book of Ecclesiastes, and particularly to younger people, but to all of us, remember now your Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. So as we leave this place, as we go on to our work, whether again it's 2 people will impact or 200,000, keep on that why of what we're doing. Pass on that love of freedom. We're called for such a time as this. And as Solomon said, remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Leadership Institute.
Hi, well, wonderful talk today. I wonder if you might be able to give the people of Arlington some advice for our school board, where they are so hell-bent on making sure that a very minority community of biological men are allowed to change and shower in the same facilities as biological women.
Yeah, so a great question. What do we do with some of these school boards? Lee, help me out here with the answer.
Nice.
Of course,
Okay.
I live in Loudoun County. Loudoun County is right there with you. Fairfax County, Arlington. I think did Alexandria. I think they've doubled down as well. There's kind of 2 answers. The first one is what we've personally done is we homeschool our kids. In fact, you probably saw the news, the music teacher at the elementary school in our little town where our sons would have gone, he was just arrested for a sting of soliciting minors for sex. And I remember when he came in, he's a recent teacher, And he immediately put the pride flags all over the pianos, and parents got mad because it was a recital, and they're like, well, it's one thing to have the pride flags up in your classroom, but why are you draping the piano that our kids are going to be doing the recital on? And even Loudoun County was like, no, you can't put it on the piano. And so what we've chosen to do is we're homeschooling our kids. We have not put them in the public school in Loudoun County because of some of these issues. There are other reasons of why we're homeschooling, but those are the significant ones. There are many private schools, but I realize that is not in the cards for every family. So that's the first thing. Look at what you need to do to make sure your children are getting a good heritage. Because that Reagan quote, it cuts deep. Sometimes we need to make the hard choices like the Pilgrims did of leaving Holland, sailing across the Atlantic Ocean in a leaky boat, and starting a new life. So there are hard choices that families have to make, and particularly in some areas where it's been resistant to electoral change. And then the second one is we have to win, and we have to get other people into our coalition. There's been much talk about that. It's something I love that Leadership Institute does, of building those coalitions and preparing people to win. And we saw an example of that in Montgomery County when you had the Muslim, Jewish, and Christian families all come united. Probably in that coalition, there were a lot of different people who voted for president, but they all were united in wanting to protect their children. So I don't know how we do that in Arlington. Some of these places, there are just, it's difficult to know, but we've got to continue to be singing sweetly that song to try and show people of this is insanity what we're doing. This is not even scientific. So not a good answer. It's why I think, Lee's going to say something.
Well, I also wanted to add that understanding the authority that your school boards actually have, because every single one of those situations in these Virginia school districts could be changed within 2 months. All the school board has to do is correct the policy. So all of the mess that's going on in your school districts is the responsibility of your school board. So what you can do is vote properly to make sure the person that's sitting on that board is conservative, but also encouraging your school district and making the community aware that they do have that sole responsibility and ability to make change immediately.
I'm with her.
She had her hand up first. Thank you for that wonderful and inspiring speech. I live in Montgomery County, and I noticed on your map it was not highlighted as a difficult state.
Yeah, so you're talking about Maryland. This is only for homeschool laws. Maryland has actually really good homeschool laws.
Do they? Because I was unable to convince Hillsdale College to try to open a charter school because they said it's so impossible with all the regulations.
Yeah, great question. So there is a big difference between charter schools and homeschooling. Charter schools still fall under the authority of the either local school board or state board of education, Maryland State Department of Education. I remember when charter schools really were coming in vogue in the early 2000s, and everyone was like, oh, this is going to be a great way to break up the monopoly of the public schools. And the teachers union was really smart. They basically co-opted the charter schools and brought them back under the supervision of the public schools. And so within a generation, I think really charter schools have lost their promise. So the legal reason is homeschooling is free in Maryland. A charter school is still considered a public school, and public school system, it's I would say public school light, sort of like Diet Coke and regular Coke. But there still is a high amount of regulation, and yeah, that is highly regulated. So it's bad news. There are a few states. We just got one through in Tennessee. Georgia has one. West Virginia has one. And then Texas has one. They've passed what are called Learning Pod Protection Acts, where parents can kind of come together with a pod, almost like a mini private school, and operate a program. But Maryland doesn't have that either.
Let's take one more question from the floor, and then I have two questions for you. All right.
Roman.
Hey, Will. You know, you're a member of the Supreme Court Bar. You are an expert on the impact of the courts on homeschooling. How do you assess the likelihood that the next time Democrats win control of Congress and the White House, they will add justices and make Ketanji Brown Jackson Chief Justice? And what would the impact of such a move be on the homeschooling movement in America?
Well, that's a sobering question, Ramon, and of course you have a solution to that. People go see Ramon afterwards because he has a solution to that. I don't know. I have been heartened that there's always been a couple Democrat senators who said, oh, this is a bad idea to pack the court. Let's not do it. Of course, it was Joe Manchin, and then Arizona, what was her name? Yeah, Kristen Sinema, thank you. And I didn't have that in my bingo card for Kristen Sinema. She came in pink-haired, and I'm like, oh, well, see, it shows me to judge. But they were two stalwarts who really held that back. And so the optimist Will Estrada is like, well, there'll always be a couple who will say, no, let's not pack the court. Then the pessimist Will Estrada is like, well, what is really to stop that from happening? And that could be very, very serious. The one good thing is I'll say, even in the Mahmoud versus Taylor case, the three liberals on the Supreme Court, they all said, oh, we don't need to do this opt-out. There's homeschooling in Maryland, and families, if they don't like the public school, they can homeschool. So it was a little bit heartening to see all 9 justices acknowledge homeschooling as kind of an additional way. Some of the blue states like Illinois and Connecticut and New Jersey and California, they have left homeschooling alone. We've had some battles, but even Democrat legislators said, no, we don't want to regulate homeschooling. So we have brought into the homeschool coalition a lot of Democrats, a lot of people who maybe were not the leaders of homeschooling in the 70s and 80s, and that has actually strengthened our position when it comes to homeschooling. So I don't know, Ramon. It's a good question. I have an optimistic and a pessimistic side, so we'll just have to see. Keep doing what you're doing.
Well, you're a great speaker and a great presenter, and we're so happy that you're here with us today. There's been an enormous achievement with respect to homeschooling, which is now generally accepted as a very legitimate way for children to be educated. So, I know that the teachers' unions and others are still bitterly hostile to the ideas of this. What are the impediments that are still in place, or maybe growing, that are in opposition to the legitimacy of homeschooling?
Well, first off, Morton, thank you. You're very kind. The teachers' unions continue to be hostile to homeschooling. Did any of you see the Corey DeAngelis tweets a couple months ago where he shared the handbook of the AFT and NEA? And they say right there, homeschooling doesn't work. It should be banned. The interesting thing, Morton, is they used to make them public planks and vote on them. And that kind of stopped, and they kind of went dark about their hostility to homeschooling, but it's still there in their handbook. Defending Education, remember Nikki Neely, she actually saved their handbook after they scrubbed it from the webpage. So it's still out there. Encourage you to take a look at it. The difficulty for the teachers' unions, as you know, is they have a lot of challenges. First and foremost being the learning loss that we've seen in public schools, the issues in public schooling. So they've lost their kind of moral high ground to really control homeschooling. But when you're talking about the impediments to homeschooling, the teachers' unions are one. The other one is legislators who frankly hate freedom. And that kind of touches on Ramon's question as well. The battles that we've been fighting in the state legislatures in the past year in particular have all been because far left radical legislators who think that, like Hillary Clinton, it takes a village to raise a child, we can't trust parents. They have been the ones leading this. There are no arguments that homeschooling is academically subpar. The arguments are all what they're doing is taking one or two very high-profile, tragic cases of abuse and neglect and saying, well, every homeschooler is like this. We need to put more regulations in place. And then when you go and dig into this, these are failures of the state child welfare agencies. And so they're protecting the bureaucracy of the child welfare agencies instead of doing the hard reform that's needed to try and make the homeschoolers the scapegoats. I mean, it's really like, you know, when Nero fiddled while Rome burned, and they was like, oh, it's all the Christians' fault, when really most history shows it was Nero himself who set the fire. Not personally, but his minions sort of thing. So that's the challenge we're facing. Yes, the teachers' unions, but the biggest challenge we've seen in the state battles are far-left legislators who hate freedom. And it's a clash of philosophies. It's a clash of worldviews. So,
Well, obviously the battle goes on. My final question is this. I have two grandchildren, both of them now in college. Neither of them ever attended a day at a public or private school. Their parents completely homeschooled them. And that was kind of easy because my son grew up knowing Mike Farris, so it was easy for that to happen. But there are people here who have children or grandchildren who have, or even perhaps great-grandchildren, who don't really know how to get started on this. If somebody knows parents or somebody who happens to be here today who is a parent and wants to know how to begin and succeed at homeschooling, where do they go to get the information to do the job right?
well, that is a great question. Congratulations to your grandkids, Morton. That's tremendous. There are two resources I'm going to put you in touch with. So hslda.org, our webpage has how to do it legally. Virginia is a great state to homeschool. My wife and I did the religious exemption because I don't want to ever have any interaction with the public school. So we filed a religious exemption letter with Loudoun County, and to their credit, rubber stamped. It was approved as they should. There's also notice of intent, but hslda.org has a lot of resources. And then Home Education Association of Virginia is a phenomenal state organization here, Virginia focused. HEAV.org is, I believe, their webpage, but if you don't have it, just Google search Home Education Association of Virginia. Tremendous resources in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Maryland, there's an organization called MACHI, the Maryland Association of Christian Home Educators, that also has a lot of great resources on their webpage.
Right. Well, thank you so much. Let me, as a little token of our appreciation, let me present to you one of the Leadership Institute's Smith ties. I know that this tie is not a stranger to your offices or your people, but there's a nice tie. Thank you so much, Will. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Morton. Thank you.
I ask you to join us next month in October for our next Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast. Evan Frost, will you please step up here? Evan and I have been spending a fair amount of time, many days in this last month or so. We are harvesting daylily seeds, and so I've got to know Evan pretty well. I invite anyone who is interested in a tour of this, our Stephen P.J. Wood building, or our two additional floors in the adjacent office building, please meet with Evan at the podium as we adjourn. Evan will give you a great tour of the Leadership Institute, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. And if he can't answer a tough question, he may pop up to my office and ask me. I'll do my best to answer it. So thank you for attending this breakfast and hearing this excellent message, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you. Okay, here's Evan. Evan, stand up here so they can circle around you if they want to.